The hall smelled like tallow candles and wine and the specific warmth of people who have eaten well and have nowhere to be. My cloak was borrowed. My hands were cold. The laughter was bright and careless and aimed at the space where I was standing. The way laughter always is when the people making it are safe and the person they are laughing at is not. It was not a private sale. Wren Carrow, who had gambled our holding into a debt he could not pay, brought me to the great hall of the regent's seat and named me before the assembled lords as the price of his pardon. Lord Harin, who ruled the realm in the king's absence, smiled thinly and accepted the gift. And the hall, the fine lords and finer ladies who had eaten our bread in better years, laughed because a cursed bride is a jest everyone can share. You could not have given him a prettier one, Carrow. Someone called, and the laugh rose again, bright and cruel. It was the laugh of people who are safe and mean, who have found a smaller person to stand on. I had heard it in the market when my mother's name was spoken. I heard it now, larger, in a hall of lords. The joke was not me, precisely. The joke was that a cursed outsider had been gifted the realm's least wanted girl, and the realm found that funny. I kept my eyes on the floor, because a souled daughter learns that dignity is the one thing they cannot take if you do not hand it to them. I did not look at my father. I had stopped looking at him the moment he named the sum. A daughter is a thing a man barters when the alternative is smaller. I had always known I was the alternative. They led me north, past the settled holds into the gray country where the true king had last been seen, before the curse took him, the songs said, and the regent's peace began. Rolan's seat was a broken keep on a ridge, its windows dark, its wolves pacing the wall like sentries that had forgotten how to be dogs. They called him the cursed Alpha because the moon struck him strange. A shadow crown burned across his brow at the full, and the beast he became was larger than any wolf and afraid of nothing. The songs made a monster of the moon's effect. They did not say the monster kept his wolves from the cold, or that the broken keep, for all its dark windows, was warmer than the hall where my father had named my price. The guards pushed me into the hall. He was there, and the sight of him stopped my breath. He stood at the far end of the long room, not on a dais. The cursed outlier kept no throne in his own hall, and the wolves at his feet lifted their heads as one when I entered, as if a door they had been guarding had at last opened. Rolan was not a monster. He was a man built like the north, broad, still, with eyes the color of a winter sky and a mark across his brow that looked, up close, less like a wound than like a crown drawn in shadow. He looked at me the way a man looks at a thing delivered to him by force, without hunger, with a tiredness that was older than the hall. "She is yours by the debt bond," Harin's steward said, pleased. "A bride for the curse. The realm is rid of Carrow's debt and gifted you a wife, my lord." The court's laughter followed me even here in the steward's smirk. Rolan heard it. He did not laugh. He looked at Harin's steward with a stillness that was not submission but assessment, the way a wolf reads a room before it moves. Then his eyes came to me. And whatever he saw there, a girl in a borrowed cloak, hands folded, jaw set, softened something in his face that the songs had insisted was stone. "A bride," he said, and his voice was low, without cruelty. "A child bartered to a curse. You laugh at the wrong woman, steward. She is the one they have sacrificed. I am the one they fear. Which of us is the joke?" He turned to me. "You may go," he said. "The bond is his, the door is open, I do not keep what is brought by force." I should have run, the door was open. But I had nowhere to run to, my father's hall would not take me back, and the road south was Harin's. A souled daughter learns the geography of her own imprisonment before she learns her letters. Mine was a triangle of three men's wills, and I was the point where they met. So I stood in the broken keep of the cursed Alpha, and I looked at the man the realm had made a monster, and I did the only thing a souled daughter learns. I did not weep, I did not leave. I waited to see what the curse would do. The mark on his brow pulsed once, like a second heartbeat, and went still. The wolves on the wall sat as one and were quiet. The great shadow wolf I had been warned of did not appear. Only the man and the mark and the silence of 100 trained killers who had decided, without a word, that the girl delivered to them was not prey. A curse, I would learn, does not keep its wolves from a stranger. A king does. I had been delivered to a monster and found a court that ran on loyalty instead of laughter. The difference I was beginning to see was the man, not the mark. The room he gave me had a fire and a door that locked from the inside. That first night I used the lock, not because I was afraid of him, because I needed one space in the world that belonged entirely to the decision I had not yet made, the door he had offered and I had not yet walked through, and the door behind me that my father had closed the moment he named my price. I sat with my back against the locked door and I let myself feel the full weight of it. Not the anger yet, that would come. Not the survival arithmetic that had been running in my head since the hall. Just the thing underneath both of those, the specific grief of a daughter who understood, finally and completely, that the man who named her a price had not made a mistake. He had made a calculation, and she had been the correct answer. I pressed my palms flat against the door and breathed. In, out, in, out. A souled daughter learns not to cry where she can be heard. She learns to be precise where she cannot be strong. She learns that grief, like fire, is useful only when it burns in the right direction. I let it burn, for as long as the locked room was mine alone. Then I dried my face, moved to the fire, and began to pay attention. To understand what the mark meant, you must understand what the realm had been told to fear. The songs said the true king had been cursed at the claiming moon and fled north, leaving the regent to keep the peace. They said the curse passed to his bloodline, and that Rolan, last of that line, bore it in the shadow crown on his brow. But the mark was no wound. I had seen it by daylight, a crown of shadow drawn across his brow, fine as tattooed smoke that caught the light like the edge of a coin. A curse does not look like a crown. A crown, sometimes, is called a curse by the man who wants the throne it signifies. They did not say that the mark was the sign of the Wolf King, the sovereign's crown, the old right to call the realm's wolves to heel. They said curse. A regent who means to rule forever calls the true king a curse, and the realm, which fears what it does not understand, believes him. I learned this slowly. The first days in the broken keep were cold and quiet. Rolan did not touch me, did not command me, did not once call me bride. He gave me a room with a fire and a door that locked from the inside, and he kept to the far end of the hold with his wolves. I learned the rhythm of the place. The wolves fed at dusk, Rolan walked the wall at midnight, the fire in my room never went out though no one admitted to tending it. A keep run by a curse was, in truth, a keep run with a care the songs never allowed. But the wolves told the truth his silence would not. They prowled the wall by day and lay at his feet by night. When I passed, they rose not to threaten, but to attend, as if a thing in me answered a thing in them. And Roland's wolf, the great beast beneath his skin, went still whenever I entered a room, the way a hunting dog goes still at the scent of home. I had read of it in the old Mate records, the stillness of a wolf that has found its bond. The songs called Rolan cursed. The wolf called him mate. The two could not both be lies, and I was beginning to suspect which was the truth. The recognition was sent, and it was old, and it frightened me more than the mark did. My own story was simpler and uglier. The Carrows had held a small river estate. My father had lost it piece by piece at the regent's tables until the only asset left was me. Haran, who had been my father's creditor and his companion in the losing, gifted the debt to Rolan as a bride tribute, a jest with a point, to tie the cursed outlier to the regent's ledger and to laugh while doing it. The laughers in the hall had not been random. They had been Haran's court, entertained by the humiliation of a nobody. I told myself Rolan was a means to survive the winter, no more. But the stillness of his wolf undid the thought every time I entered a room, a beast that had gone restless near others, and still near me was not a curse's beast. It was a mate's, and the songs had simply refused to name it. One evening he found me by the hearth and sat at the far end, as was his habit. "Your father bartered you for a debt he gambled," he said, not unkindly. Haran arranged it. "The regent likes a jest that costs another man his daughter." "He arranged the debt too," I said. "They were at the table together." Roland's eyes sharpened, the first real interest he had shown in my family. He had spent years hearing only Haran's version of the realm, a cursed outlier, a peaceful regency, a throne better empty. My father's name on the debt and Haran's hand beneath it was the first crack in that version. "Did they?" he said. "Then you were not a bride. You were a transaction between two men who use women as coin. I am sorry the coin was you." He said it without pity, which was why I believed him. A man who pities you means to keep you small. A man who is sorry for the truth means to set it right. He said it of my father's debt, but the words fit the realm's larger theft. Haran had sold a kingdom the same way, as a thing to be named and owned by another. "I am not your bride," I said. "You are not," he agreed. "The door is open. The bond is your father's, not mine. When you wish to walk, walk." He turned back to the fire, giving me his back the way a man gives trust without a guard on it. The cursed Alpha, the realm's monster, had just handed a stranger the one thing Haran never would: the freedom to leave. It was a small thing, a door. It was the only thing no one had ever given me. I did not walk. Not that night. The mark on his brow pulsed once as I rose to go, and the wall wolves, all of them, laid their heads down, as if, for the first time since the songs began, the curse had found something it wanted to keep. The curse came for the first time on a night with no moon. I woke to a sound like stone tearing, Roland's beast form, the shadow wolf the songs feared, rising in the yard below my window. I should have been afraid. Instead, I went to the glass. A souled daughter learns that fear is a luxury. Watching is survival. What I saw was not the monster of the songs. The shadow wolf was vast, yes, and crowned in living dark, and terrible in the way a storm is terrible. But it was between me and the yard gate, where three men in Haran's gray were climbing the wall. Rolan did not tear them. He herded them, drove them back over the stones, and when one raised a blade the beast did not kill, it broke the wrist and let the man fall, whimpering, into the snow. Then it turned. The great shadow crown lowered. It looked up at my window, and bowed its head, not to me exactly, to the recognition between us. The scent that had gone still the first night. The monster the realm feared knelt in the snow before the souled girl no one had wanted. I felt the last of my fear leave, because a thing that bows to you is not your enemy. The curse, I understood, was a guard. The songs had mistaken a king's protection for a king's affliction. Haran's men had come for me, or for him, or for both of us as a single prize. The shadow wolf had not distinguished. It had simply stood between the threat and the hold, the way a king stands between his people and the dark. In the morning the men were gone, and Rolan was a man again, blood at his temple from a glancing stone, tending the wall wolves as if nothing had happened. He moved among the beasts with a hand on this shoulder, and that, a shepherd among his flock. The picture of it, the feared curse tending his wolves like a farmer his lambs, undid another piece of the songs. I brought him a cloth for the cut. "You did not kill them," I said. "I am not the monster they named," he said. "A king protects his hold. He does not feast on intruders." He said it plainly, as a man states whether, no defensiveness, no performance of mercy. The cursed alpha of the songs would have snarled. This man simply told the truth of what he was and trusted me to hear it. I did. "Were they Harins?" He looked at me a moment too long. "You are quicker than the court gave you credit for." "My father's creditors are not subtle," I said. "Harin sent them. He arranged the debt, the barter, and now the raid. I am the thread he is pulling to draw you out." Rolan went very still, not the wolf's stillness. The man's, the kind that comes before a decision. You see it, not the fear. Not the songs, the shape of the trap. A souled girl learns to read a snare the way a healer reads a fever, by the places the skin has been pressed too tight. "I see that I am not a bride," I said. "I am bait, and you are not a curse. You are the thing the bait was meant to catch." He did not deny it. "The mark is the Wolf King's crown," he said. "It lets me call the realms wolves, and it makes me the regent's enemy." Harin spread the curse lie to keep the throne empty and the true king in the wilds. "Your father's debt was the hinge. You were bartered to me to bind me to Harin's ledger, and to give the regent a reason to call me traitor when he moves." So the laughter in the hall had been the opening move of a war. I had been the pawn, bartered onto the board. The jest the court laughed at was the snare closing. And I, the bait, had chosen to stay on the board, not because I was trapped, but because the man at the center of the trap had left me free to move. A pawn, I was learning, can choose which square to stand on. The beast had not bitten me. The crown had shielded me. I had come north expecting a monster and found a wall. I had come as a sacrifice and found myself protected by the very thing I was sacrificed to. And the man who wore it had offered me the door 3 times and never once closed it. That I would come to understand was the whole of his kingship, not the shadow crown, not the wolves, but the door left open for the person the realm had sacrificed. "You should tell the realm what you just told me," I said. "Tell a realm that fears the crown it should crown?" He almost smiled. "They would laugh, Wren, they laughed at you. They would laugh at the truth until someone they trust confirms it. The crown does not argue with fear. It waits for the worthy to see it." He looked at me as he said worthy, and the wolves on the wall laid their heads down, and I understood, with a clarity that frightened me, that the worthy one he meant might be the souled girl no one had wanted. The thought should have flattered me. It terrified me instead. Because to be worthy of a king's crown is to be a target twice over, once for the regent who fears it, once for the realm that does not yet believe. I had been bartered to safety and found myself at the center of a war. The proof of the regent's fear came from an old woman with a long memory. Vesh, who had been the true king's nurse before the songs were written, found me in the herb garden and pressed a thing into my hand. A coin of the old mint bearing the shadow crown. "He wore it the day he was born," she said. "The regent's scribes scratched it from the records and wrote curse in its place. Your Rolan is the king, child. The mark is his father's and his father's father's, the wolf king's crown, not a sickness." I turned the coin in my palm. The shadow crown on it was the twin of the mark on Rolan's brow. A scribe's knife had tried to unmake a king by scratching a line, and for 30 years the scratch had held. Vesh had kept the proof in her apron, the way old women keep the truths young men are paid to forget. She had kept the coin and the record and the story against the day a worthy ear would listen. Why does Harin fear it? I asked. Because a crowned king ends the regency, Vesh said. Harin has ruled 30 years on the excuse that the throne is cursed and empty. Show the realm the crown is real, and the regent is a usurper who has lied to a generation. He will not let that stand. That is why he bound your barter to Rolan's name, to make the true king look like a traitor who took a bride by force, and to draw him south to be taken. Her hand on my arm was steady and certain. You are the one, she said, simply, as if stating whether. The crown recognizes its equal child. That is why they bartered you, they feared what you might see. So the barter was a trap with two teeth. Discredit the king, lure him to his death. I had been the bait, the jest, and the snare all at once. Vesh's coin weighed in my palm like a verdict the realm had been too afraid to read. A scribe's lie had ruled a generation. A sold girl's hands now held the proof that would end it. I took the coin to Rolan that evening. He turned it in his palm, and for a moment the hard man softened into someone who had been told his whole life he was a curse. They scratched it from the records, he said, quiet. My mother's line, unmade by a scribe's knife. Harin built a piece on a lie, and the lie has held because fear is easier to believe than a crown. He is afraid of you, I said. That is why he sent me. A feared king is a king who can be killed. A curse is a thing to be pitied and ignored. Then I must stop being a curse, Rolan said. He set the coin down between us. And you must decide, Wren, before I do. Harin will come for you to use you as proof I took a bride or to silence the one who sees the truth. If you stay, you are a target. If you go through that open door, I will not follow, and you will be safe from the regent's war. He said it the way he had said everything. Without grasping, without pleading, the door was open, it had always been open. But I had spent a lifetime being the thing men bartered and the thing men used. For the first time, a man was asking me what I chose, not what I was worth to a ledger. The curse had offered me freedom 3 times. The king offered me a choice. I am not leaving, I said. Not while the realm thinks you are a monster I was sacrificed to. I have been laughed at enough to know the sound of a lie dressed as a jest. I will stay, and I will help you show them the crown. He looked at me for a long moment. The shadow crown on his brow pulsed once, steady as a heartbeat that had found a second. Then we end the regent's peace, he said, together. He did not take my hand. He did not promise. He simply named us as 2 people who had chosen the same side, and left the rest, the door, the choice, the crowns equal for me to claim. We spent the days that followed in quiet preparation. Not war planning exactly, something slower and more necessary than strategy. The kind of preparation that happens when 2 people who have been alone for a long time begin to learn the rhythm of each other's thinking. He showed me the old records he had kept. Route maps, pack rosters, correspondence from lords who had quietly doubted Harin's regency for years but lacked the proof to act. I showed him what I had learned in my father's house, the way debt works as a leash, the way a creditor controls more than money, the way Harin had likely been running the same architecture across the realm for 30 years. He listened with the complete attention of a man who has been starved of honest counsel. I spoke with the complete attention of a woman who has never before been asked to think aloud for someone who would use what she said well. By the 3rd evening of this, I realized I was no longer calculating my survival. I was building something. That realization settled quietly in my chest and stayed there. Rolan called the realm to the claiming moon. Haran, unable to refuse a summons from the cursed outlier without admitting his fear, came. The great hall of the regent's seat was full of the same lords who had laughed at my barter. Haran had dressed the summons as a curiosity, the cursed outlier demanding audience, and the lords came to be entertained, not ruled. They expected a monster and a meek bride. They got a king and a witness, and the gap between their expectation and the truth was the first crack in 30 years of peace by lie. They lined the benches in gray and gold. When Rolan entered with me at his side, not a bride, a witness, the laughter rose again, bright and cruel, because the court had not changed and neither, they believed, had he. But the court was wrong about him, as it had been wrong about me. The laughter was the last breath of a lie that had ruled 30 years, and it would not last the telling of the truth. Haran sat on the high seat he had occupied for 3 decades. The cursed outlier brings his purchased bride to lecture the realm, the regent said, and the hall enjoyed it. Shall we hear the curse speak? Haran's smile was the smile of a man who has ruled unchallenged so long he has forgotten the sound of a challenge. It would not last the moon. Rolan did not speak at once. He let them laugh. The great shadow wolf of the songs was nowhere in the hall. Only the man and the mark and a stillness that silenced the benches without a word. Then he lifted his head, and the shadow crown on his brow blazed, not the flicker of a wound, but the full, sovereign burning of the Wolf King's mark. The wall wolves of the hold rose as one, and from the forests beyond the hall a sound answered. The realm's wolves, pack upon pack, lifting their voices in the old greeting of a crowned king. From every wood and ridge the answer came, until the hall itself seemed to breathe with the realm's wolves, and the lords who had laughed found themselves surrounded by the proof they had denied, not a curse's army, but a king's, answering the crown they had mocked. The laughter died as a candle dies, not blown out, simply gone, because awe does not laugh. The curse is the crown, Rolan said, and his voice carried to the rafters without rising. I am the last of the Wolf King's line. Haran scratched the mark from the records and wrote curse where he should have written king. He bartered this woman to me to bind me to his ledger and to lure me south to die. The debt was his, the jest was his, the lie is his. He turned to me. Wren was bartered against her will by a father and a regent who used daughters as coin. She is no bride of mine. She is the witness who saw the truth, and the realm owes her an apology it will not want to give. Vesh stepped forward with the old coin and a scribe's record she had hidden, and the proof piled on the regent's own table. Haran's own scribes, summoned, could not meet the coin's face. The record Vesh produced named Roland's line in the old script. The regent's forged curse page was conspicuously absent of the scribe's seal. The lie laid next to its proof looked small. Haran's face, for the first time in 30 years, had no smile to offer. The lords who had laughed looked at one another, and the lie they had enjoyed unspooled in their hands. The jest they had shared curdled into something like shame, the shame of men who had amused themselves at the cost of a girl and a king, and now saw the cost was the realm itself. Seize him, Haran said to his guard. The guard did not move. The wolves at the wall had not moved either, and the men, who had spent a career fearing the curse, now knelt, because the crown does not argue with fear, it ends it. The guard's knees hit the stone as one, and the regent's own captain bowed his head, because a wolf knows its king, and the crown, blazing on Roland's brow, was the only truth in the room that did not quaver. Haran sat with the high seat suddenly too large for him. The regent who had laughed at my barter now sat in the silence of a man whose life's work was a lie. The crown on Roland's brow did not gloat, it simply was. The truth, at last, wearing the face the realm had feared. The regent's peace, built on a scribe's knife and a generation's fear, collapsed in the space of a held breath. The cursed alpha was the king, the souled girl was the witness, and the laughter that had opened my story became, at the last, a silence that belonged to the truth. The reckoning for the laughers was not a shout, it was a settling of accounts. I returned to the regent's seat for it, the same stones where I had been named a price. The lords who had laughed lined the benches again, older by a moon, quieter by the truth. Haran was confined pending the council the new king would convene. Usurpation, the manufacture of a curse to hold a throne, the barter of a free woman as a snare. The lords who had laughed were not punished. They were simply seen, which a proud man feels more keenly than a blow. My father, Wren Carrow, was summoned. With him came the debt bond that had been the hinge of the whole plot. Rolan voided it. He spoke the words of the crown's authority, and the debt bond that had been my father's leverage and Haran's trap unraveled like a rope cut at the knot, leaving me, for the first time, with no man's claim on my name. By the crown's authority, he said, in the hall where I had been bartered, the debt bond between Carrow and the regent is null. The sum was Haran's contrivance. The barter was his trap. Wren of the River estate is free of it and of Carrow's claim by her own will. He turned to my father. The estate reverts to you by default, not as reward but as consequence. When Haran's debts are voided alongside his authority, what the regent falsely held returns to its original holder. You receive nothing from the crown. You receive only what the collapse of a liar's ledger returns to you by accident. It is not generosity, it is arithmetic. My father stood small in the great room. The man who had named me a price looked at the woman who had become a king's witness and found no words that were not shame. He opened his mouth to plead or to bargain or to name me daughter as if the word could undo the sale, and found no sound that was not ash. Rolan did not wait for it. He turned from my father to me because a king's justice is for the guilty, and a king's attention, I was learning, was for the person who had earned it. My father did not beg. He had not earned the right. A father who barters his daughter does not get to weep at the ending. Carrow simply stood and then walked, and the estate he had gambled away did not call him back, because a man who loses his honor at a table does not find it at a door. Redemption, for the man who sold his daughter, was not a thing the king could grant. Only the daughter could, and I had no mercy left for the man who had spent it. Then Rolan turned to me, the hall emptied of everyone but us and the weight of the choice. The crown is revealed, he said. The regent falls. The realm is mine by right, and you are free of every bond that brought you here. The door is open, Wren, the same door I showed you the first night. You owe me no gratitude. You owe Haran no forgiveness. If you walk, I will not follow, and the wolves will see you safe to whatever home you name. He offered it as he had offered everything, without a hand to close it. A king who had spent his life behind a lie knew the value of a door left open. I had been bartered, laughed at, used as bait, and named a sacrifice. And the man who wore the curse had never once tried to keep me. That, more than the crown or the wolves, was the thing that made me stay. Not the crown, not the wolves. The door left open, again and again, by the one man the realm had called a monster. A souled girl learns to distrust a hand that closes too fast. Rolan had never closed his. That was the love, if love it was, not a claiming, but a door. The claiming moon rose again over the rebuilt hall, silver and patient as the night I had been bartered. I did not wait for a summons. I went to Rolan. He was at the far end of the long room, not on a dais, still, even now that the throne was his by right. The wolves lay at his feet in the particular quiet of animals that have found their purpose. The fire burned low. The shadow crown on his brow caught the moonlight coming through the high windows and held it, gentle now, familiar, a mark I had long since stopped seeing as strange. He looked up when I entered. The wall wolves did not rise this time. They simply watched the way creatures watch when something they have been waiting for has finally arrived. I stopped in front of him. "I came to choose," I said, "not because the crown cleared me, though it did. Not because Harin fell, though he should. But because you showed me the same open door 3 times and never once stood in it." He was very still, the good still, the man still, the kind that comes before a thing is received rather than decided. A man who does not trap a woman is rarer than a king who commands wolves, I said. I had been trapped by a father's debt and a regent's smile. The only man who had not trapped me was the one the realm called a curse, which told me more about the realm than the curse. I was bartered, laughed at, used as bait. And you were the only one who asked me not what I was worth, but what I wanted. He set down the coin that had been in his hand. Vesh's coin, the old mint, the shadow crown that had started everything. He set it down carefully, the way he set down everything that mattered, without ceremony, without weight, simply placing it where it belonged so his hands could be open. Something in his face moved, not the controlled stillness I had come to know as his default, something under it. The specific expression of a man who has been patient for so long that patience has become indistinguishable from hope, and who has just been told the hope was not wasted. His jaw shifted once. His eyes, winter sky gray in the moonlight, held mine with the full, unguarded attention he had always given me, and for the first time since I had walked into this hall in a borrowed cloak with cold hands, I felt the weight of how long he had been waiting without saying so. Not demanding, not implying. Simply present, available. The door open, always the door open, for as long as it took for me to be ready to walk through it of my own will. "I want you to choose freely," he said. His voice was the same as it had always been, low, without cruelty, without pressure. "The realm is mine, you are not. If you stay, it is as Wren, not as a bride bought by a debt. Not as a witness to a crown. If you go, the door is open, as it always was." "I want the door open," I said. The corner of his mouth moved. "And I want to be the one who closes it by walking through it. To you," he rose. Not quickly, not with the urgency of a man who has been waiting and cannot wait any longer. With the deliberate, unhurried certainty of a man who has learned that some things are worth arriving at slowly, so that when they arrive, they are fully real. He stopped in front of me, close enough that I could feel the warmth of him, cedar and snow, and the particular steadiness of a man who has stood in the cold for years and learned to generate his own heat. He raised one hand, slow enough for refusal. His fingers rested against my jaw, light as a question. I turned my face into his hand the way his wolves had once turned their heads toward the door I had walked through, not because they were commanded to, but because something in them recognized something in me, and the recognition was the whole of the answer. His forehead came to rest against mine. The shadow crown was warm where it touched the air between us. Not a curse, never a curse. "I chose the door," I said quietly for the last time, "and I am closing it." He kissed me beneath the claiming moon, a closed door, a heart's confession, his forehead resting against mine so that I breathed cedar and snow and the particular peace of a man who had waited without demanding. There was no curse that bound us. Only the decision made twice, once by the goddess, who had recognized what the realm denied, and once by me, who had been bartered for that very recognition and had chosen, freely, to claim it. The curse had been a crown all along. The crown had been a king all along. And the king, at the last, had been a man who left the door open until I walked through it to him. They laughed when I was bartered to the cursed Alpha. They do not laugh now. The curse was his crown, and the crown was his kingship, and the sold girl was the one the crown recognized as its equal. The regent who built a peace on a lie lost it to the truth. And I, who had been the jest, became the witness, the choice, and at last the queen who had opened the door herself. The old coin vesh kept rests now in the new queen's archive, proof that a scribe's knife cannot unmake a king, and that a sold girl, given a door and a choice, may close it on the life she was bartered into and open it onto the one she chooses. The mark on his brow, once called a curse, now blazed as the blessing it had always been. I had been bartered to a monster and found a king. And the king, who had been feared for the very thing that made him sovereign, found in me the one person who had never once been afraid of the crown, only of losing the door he left open. A realm that had cursed him for the crown learned, through a sold girl's choosing, what the crown had been all along. Not a curse to fear, but a king to follow. I kept my name. I kept the choice. And I chose, freely, the man the realm had cursed and I had crowned. The sold girl and the cursed king, who had been the realm's two jokes, became its two truths. And the laughter that opened my story closed on the silence of a realm that had finally learned to see the crown. Before I let you go, I need you to tell me something, because this story has been sitting with me. Wren's father bartered her. He stood in that hall and named her price. And at the end, Rolan gave him back his estate, not as reward, not as forgiveness, as arithmetic, as the accident of a liar's ledger collapsing. And Wren gave him nothing. No mercy, no words, she simply turned away. Tell me in the comments. Was that the right ending for her father, or did he deserve something worse than her silence? And the question I really want you to fight about, the court laughed at her. At the end, they knelt. Was that enough? Or should the laughers have paid a higher price than shame?